Hey guys, and welcome back to another Godot 4 tutorial. This is going to be a nice simple one, but we'll touch on a few different basics like tile maps, sprite animations, lighting, particle effects and sound, with the outcome being a cozy little fireplace for a 2D pixel art game. We're starting with an empty project as usual, besides from a few assets which I've already imported. I'll link all the assets I've used in the description below, which includes the tile map used for the background, the sound effect for the fire, and the fire animation sprites themselves. The project as a whole can also be found on my GitHub if you want to clone it down yourself and take a look. That's also linked in the description. Let's kick things off by creating a room to put our fireplace in. We first create a tile map layer and then create a new tile set, importing our floors and walls atlas in and letting the tile set automatically create our tiles. We then use the tile map to paint in our room. Once that's in place, we'll then create a new scene for our fireplace and bring our sprite assets in. I split the actual fireplace into two different sprites, a front and a back. This is because I want the fire animation to sit between them, so the flames don't appear over the top of the fireplace, which will look weird, but also appear behind the grey at the front. I use a sprite atlas for this and make them unique so that I can set different offsets to use different sprites on each layer. We'll then create our animated sprite and set up 3 different animations. We'll be setting up our fire so it can be turned on and off. Therefore we'll need our first animation, which I've left to be named default, that is the on state, and then a start and end animation for when the fire gets toggled. To toggle our fire, I'm just going to add a script to the main game scene, which detects any time I press a certain action and calls toggle on the fire. It's worth noting that to use this interact action, you'll need to create it in the project settings using the input mapper. We'll then add our code to toggle the fire on or off in a new Fireplace script. First, I'll create a toggle function that simply calls turn on or turn off, dependent on the current state, which we'll track in a variable called active. Then in our turn on function, we want to play the start animation, and after it's finished, play the default animation, which we'll do by using the await animation finished signal. All we need to do in turn off for now is play the stop animation. Now that we've got toggling working, it's highlighted a couple of things to watch out for in our animation setup. First, we want our default animation to loop, but the start and end animation should only play once. So first, I'll disable the looping on those. Secondly, the end frame in our end animation includes the final dispersion of the fire, but then won't disappear afterwards. So I'm just going to add an empty frame to the end of the animation so it doesn't end up hanging around after it's turned off. Cool, now that we've got our basic fireplace set up, we'll add some particle effects. After creating the particle effects node, we'll start by updating the lifetime from 1 second to 3 and adding some randomness to it. Then we'll change the emission shape to sphere so we get some nice variation as to where the particles spawn in around the fire. And obviously we don't want our embers falling down with gravity, but instead drifting up to the ceiling, so let's set our gravity to -25 on the Y radius. We'll also add some radial acceleration so they're not all just flying straight up in the air. Then let's have a look at the scale. We'll adjust them so they scale in from nothing and then slowly reduce in size until they disappear at the end of their lifetime. And finally, let's add some colour. You can set this to whatever you think looks best, so have a play around. But I'm going to start them with white and then transition to orange, red, and finally a smoky black when they fade out completely. Then all we need to do is start emitting them when we turn the fire on and stop when we turn it off. Great, I think that's really helped in adding some much needed life and variance to our fire. Now the next thing we'll do is add some sound. I got a free looping crackling fireplace sound effect from freesound.com, which we'll add to an audio stream player 2D. I'll crank up the sound a bit for this video and then we can just enable it or disable it in our toggle code. Final thing we'll add is some actual light. We'll set up a point light using a gradient texture, which will make radial and play around with the values like you can see on screen, so we get a white sphere transitioning to black on the edges. Now we don't want to just turn this light on and off with the fire, but instead slowly fade in and out so it looks a bit more natural. To do that, we'll set up a few variables in our code to track the change, using the energy value we set on the point light as its on state, and then we'll set our current and target values to this as well as the scene starts with the fire on. In the process function, which runs once per frame, we then just need to move our current energy value towards the target energy value if they're not equivalent, and set the target to 0 when turning the fire off, and then back to the original amount when turning it on. Now that's looking great, but it's a little bit dark when it's turned off, so I'll just add another point light to our main scene for some ambient lighting from the ceiling. In a full game, you'd likely have some other light sources or a directional light maybe to do this instead, but this will do for the purposes of the tutorial. And there we have it, a cozy little fireplace that we can interact with and turn on and off. To further explore some of these concepts, maybe try taking it a bit further by looking into environments and bloom to add some glow to the fire or the particles, or play around with the lighting and add a bit more of a flicker to the fire. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you found this enjoyable and useful. I'll be continuing to crack through some more of these little tutorials, as well as some game development logs of my own development projects soon, so please remember to subscribe if you're interested in seeing more. I'll catch you in the next one, and until then, take care.